welcome to another episode. Super excited today to have on Dan Lewkowicz. And Dan is a true innovator in the industry, as we'll talk about. Right now, he's a top commercial real estate broker for Encore Real Estate Investment Services. And he was actually named one of the top CRE or commercial real estate influencers in 2024, as well as his podcast being one of the top podcasts in commercial real estate. So, Dan, thanks for taking the time to come on today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. So let's kick this off. One of the reasons that I brought Dan on the podcast is because Dan has so much experience in real estate, as you'll see, and it's a lot of different facets in real estate. Because as we all know, there's a lot of different ways to make money in real estate. So Dan started out house hacking, he's done some flipping. Now he's a commercial real estate broker. He owns commercial real estate. So really, again, all facets of the industry. And I think he's going to open up a big opportunity that a lot of you listeners haven't really seen before and give you the motivation to level up when it comes to your real estate in 2025, specifically growing your portfolio and really becoming a more well-rounded real estate investor. So Dan, as far as getting started with you, can you talk about your journey from house hacking, the first house hacking that you did? A lot of people start with that. And then you went to build a company called Renaissance Real Estate Ventures, which I believe is a flipping company, right? Fix and flip, that sort of thing. What sparked your interest in real estate, and talk about your journey?
Yeah, so really it all boils down to kind of one moment in my mind in terms of a major turning point. So in 2005, I had helped start a company with some friends called Disability Made Easy. It's a barrier-free home modification company that takes homes and makes them handicap accessible. The company's still in existence today, run by my very close friends. And I did most of the sales and marketing. That was really my background, is that outgoing guy doing the sales and marketing. But I did get to spend some time with our project manager. And I'll never forget, one time we had taken a drive way out of our home area to go look at a property. The individual had been in a car accident about 25 years prior. And we got to the property. I looked around and kept my mouth shut and walked outside with the project manager. And I said, you want to get back in the van? He kind of looked at me puzzled. I said, what are we going to do here? This house is like completely, it's obsolete. There's no way that this house can do what this guy wants it to do. He didn't say a word. He took out a piece of graph paper and a pencil, and about 90 seconds later, he had sketched a new front elevation and a new layout. And he was able to redesign this entire home to make it fitting and appropriate for the occupant. And to me, it just kind of set off a light bulb like, wow, you could take a piece of real estate, make some changes, add value, and make it more functional. So I kind of put that memory into the recesses of my mind. And when it came time to buy my first home, I had a young family at the time. I had a contract out on a property that was ready to go, move in ready. This was during the last recession, so the numbers I'm going to give are kind of laughable. But that property, we were under contract at $175,000. And I remember hearing that there were many bank-owned properties just one street over. So I got in touch with some lenders. I found literally an identical home that needed some work, but it was bank-owned. And I ended up purchasing it for $81,000. I then went ahead and hired out every single trade. I didn't hire a general contractor. I hired every single trade, and I stayed there. I supervised them. I told them, I'll pay you a little bit extra just so I can ask questions and annoy you and learn about each trade so that I understand what goes into renovating a home. And by the time I was done renovating that house, that was a full, gut job, $65,000 renovation. I went ahead and bought another property in a nearby city and did the same thing. And then I bought another property, another property, started going to tax auctions, mortgage foreclosure auctions, and just doing this in city after city after city. And as the years went on, I eventually, took my business and I rebranded it Renaissance Real Estate Ventures, moved into the city of Detroit because the city of Detroit was about 7 years behind on the foreclosure crisis from the rest of the country. So I was able to, glean those opportunities as the rest of the areas had really appreciated in price. And I continued to buy properties, renovate them, and resell them. So that's really how I got into house hacking and building a company, that specialized in flipping houses. And eventually, I actually was able to make the transition full time into net lease investment sales brokerage as a commercial real estate broker, which is what I do today and absolutely love. It's very different than house hacking and then flipping houses, but that was my journey to get to the position that I'm in today.
Yeah, so let's talk about that transition. It's always like we all have transitions in life and they can be really difficult, and some people just operate with paralysis, with fear, right? And I'm
Yeah.
sure that you faced a lot of that, moving from flipping houses all the way to the large scale real estate investments, like you're saying. So, talk about that. Talk about some of those challenges that you faced, how you overcame them, and kind of what brought you to where you're at.
Yeah, I mean that transition was again very in my mind. It's very vibrant, one moment, and that moment was, 11 or 11:30 at night, getting a phone call from the Detroit Police Department that one of my properties had been broken into, and then, literally putting on a bulletproof vest and driving downtown, kissing my daughter goodnight, thinking, "Oh my goodness, like what is she thinking? Why is my father leaving at such a god awful hour, right?" And then going down there and having to deal with that, and I mean, having cabinets stolen, literally, like, the crew opens the garage door to get the cabinets, goes back inside, and then they're stolen. Having
Oh,
someone come back to the property and try to sell us the same AC condenser that they stole that morning. It was
hmm.
just a lot of that hands-on, that grinding, that, I was boots on the ground. Like I was making it happen. I was hustling. I was doing everything from, networking with asset managers so that I could get the best properties that were available, to managing contractors, to dealing with, like I said, the police department. And I think it just hit me at that moment that there was so much risk and there was so much, physical activity that was required. When I had heard about, commercial brokerage, the idea that I could, if I wanted to, I could sit in an office, I could sit at home, I could be in a different state, I could travel, very little financial investment. Granted, I invest a lot in my business today, but when I started, it wasn't like this. And the ability to be able to again transact and go to a closing and get paid just like I do on a flip, but not to have all those other hands-on, active, nerve-wracking components was very appealing to me. And it was kind of like a breath of fresh air when I realized that, because an average deal for me as a broker is more lucrative than probably one of my best flips with very little risk and very little activity. So for me, it just made a lot more sense.
Okay. So it sounds like the fear that you actually had as a flipper from the BS you were dealing with, right? The things getting stolen, the day-to-day minutia, like just
Yeah.
having to deal with all that. That fear is what led you to say, "Hey, I want a better opportunity, something without as many things that could go wrong, I guess, or without all the bees things that I had to manage." And I would agree with you that commercial real estate, residential real estate, sales in general, I mean, there's a big incentive to get a property to the closing table, and you get paid as the salesperson. And for our listeners that don't really understand the numbers, like what Dan is talking about is that on a commercial real estate transaction, I'm sure the ones that you're dealing with, they could be huge office buildings, big strip centers, etc. Industrial, as we'll talk about. These can be multi-million. We're not talking about half a million, a million. Yeah, those are there, but some of these can be, 10 million, 20 million plus, right? So I'm not going to even say that I know, but I would expect, based on what I understand of real estate, commercial real estate sales, as the broker of, say, a $20 million deal, you could be putting away a six-figure commission
Oh
easily,
yeah.
right? Multiple six figures on one deal. Now, that one deal might take you 6 months, a year, or more to put together. But having a couple of those deals in the pipeline, closing just a few, just a handful, can be multiple six figures, and in many cases, a seven-figure income without a lot of the BS. So, I mean, that resonates with me as far as why you did that. But what today, 2025, excites you about commercial real estate now? Because we were talking about back then going from flipper and all that to this, but now it's been years, right? Now you're seasoned. Now you know what's going on in the industry. There's a lot of people saying commercial real estate is dead. There's a lot of people seeing, writing on the wall with vacancies and things, trying to get out. You're running into the fire, right? So let's talk about why, and what do you see that maybe some of their listeners, maybe some investors aren't seeing, being boots on the ground like you.
Yeah, I mean, I made a post about this on LinkedIn this week because on Saturday I got a phone call in the morning, and it was from a client of mine, and he, asked me if I work on Saturdays. New client of mine asked me if I work on Saturdays, and I quoted Boondock Saints, telling him that, we're like 7-Eleven, right? We might not always be doing business, but we're always open. And it was a
Mm-hmm.
joke, but what most excites me in response to your question is just the everyday stuff. I love getting those phone calls at nights and on weekends. I love talking real estate. I love coming on podcasts like this. I've been on over 300 podcasts. I love talking with people and just doing anything commercial real estate. So in terms of some of the things that you've mentioned, I mean, listen, Is commercial real estate dead? Is retail dead? I mean, you tell me. As long as guys like us have a dollar in our pocket, we're going to spend it. We're a consumeristic society. Retail is not dead. In fact, retail vacancy rates are at 20-year historic lows of about 4.1%. That doesn't sound like it's dead to me. Commercial real estate certainly isn't dead. I mean, go about your day and think about how many things you do that involve commercial real estate, whether it's filling up your car for gas, going grocery shopping, right? Going to the convenience store, stopping at Taco Bell, getting your prescriptions filled. I mean, all of this is retail, is commercial real estate. In terms of what's like coming down the pike in 2025, I mean, we're bullish. We're excited because, the Fed has been lowering rates. That's a good sign. We believe that this incoming administration will, a good sign for commercial real estate. We believe that this incoming administration will be friendlier for business and for commercial real estate. I suspect that values will go up and have an upward trajectory in the near term. I'm excited about that. I mean, there's a lot to be excited about today in 2025. And just remember what you read out there, the headlines, fear sells, but ultimately, we can't live our life that way. And there's so much more going on, and the picture is so much brighter than some portray it to be.
So, like diving a little deeper into that sectors, there's certain sectors in commercial that are looking like shining stars, right? And I'm talking about in the industrial space, the e-commerce warehouse. I think that that's like a big area. So talk through some of those. The other one I'm hearing is medical office, huge
Yeah.
right now. So what are some of those like shining stars that are really coming up to the top of the totem pole, right? In commercial, where people didn't love industrial 10 years ago. Now it's the next best thing.
Yeah, so one of them you already mentioned is medical office. I mean, I listed a medical office building about 2 weeks ago and have already received 8 offers on it. One of the reasons medical office is so appealing is the stickiness of the tenant, right? If you're buying a commercial property, you're not just buying it for the sticks and bricks, right? It's not like a house. You're buying it for the income stream. And it's very important that you know with relative certainty that your tenant is going to stick around, right? So medical tenants tend to stick around. Number one, because they often deploy significant capital expenditure in their space, right? They may put
Mhm.
imaging in there, like, MRIs and X-rays, and they may, invest in all different types of fit outs that are gonna be very expensive. I'm dealing with a particular medical office building where one of the 13 tenants, just one of the tenants, a urology clinic, just put $700,000 of their own money into the space. So you tell me, are they going anywhere? That's reason number one. Reason number two is trying to relocate medical is very difficult, right? If I go to a doctor, let's say I'm a leasing broker, and I say, hey, I've got a great space for you. It's 50 miles away. The doctor's going to laugh at me because his or her patients are not going to travel 50 miles to a new location, right? They want to be in that location. So the fact that they've invested significant capital in many cases, and the fact that relocation to another area is not at all something that is good for their business model. Those two factors keep them very sticky. So medical office has been hot, and it's a great asset class. Another asset class that's been very hot that I do a lot of business in fact, my first deals were in this business class, and still I do a lot in it, in this asset class, is shopping centers. And shopping centers offer a diversification of risk because you have many tenants instead of one tenant, and they offer a lot of upside potential in raising rents, in converting leases from gross leases where the landlord has responsibilities for covering expenses to triple net leases where they get reimbursed for those expenses. And in addition, one of the reasons that shopping centers have become even more popular is during this period of time, this 28 months or so, where interest rates went from effectively, the federal funds rate was at effectively zero and went up to 5.25, 5.5%, right? Interest rates went from 2.75 to 7.25, 7.5, right? So the problem was for what I do is a lot of the single tenant net lease stuff that we sell, like, your Taco Bells and Chick-fil-A's and Paneras and Starbucks, there we're trading at cap rates, let's say 5, 6%. So when interest rates were at 2.75 or 3%, there's enough arbitrage there. There's enough spread between what you can borrow at and what your cash flow's at to make the deal make sense. When rates went to 7%, the 5% deal didn't make sense anymore. However, shopping centers, at least a large majority of the product that's available, were already trading above current debt rates when debt was at, 2.5, 3%. as debt went higher, shopping center cap rates went higher, and investors were still able to capture that delta. So because of the upside potential, as well as the ability to finance, and have healthy cash flow returns, that's also made shopping centers, very attractive and very popular. You mentioned industrial. Industrial has been on fire for a number of years, as we kind of, products, as I would say, come off of shelves in stores and
Mhm.
go into shelves in warehouses. So there was a large demand for that, large demand for e-commerce. Now, keep in mind, people think that e-commerce is going to ruin retail, and it definitely won't for a variety of reasons. But, e-commerce sales make up roughly 17 to 20% of all retail sales. So nowhere near a majority, number one. Number two, a lot of people still buy in line online and pick up in store, or shop in store and then go online. So there's really a need for brick and mortar. But the point that I'm bringing up is that, industrial has been very hot. I think we're going to see a cooling period because values have risen and rents have risen so rapidly. But it's definitely an asset class of the future. That's for sure.
No, that's a great point because you don't, as an investor, want to be chasing an asset class that was already hot, right? It's like you want to be finding the next best thing. So, from what you said, there's a diamond in the rough with the shopping centers, with the
But
retail,
yeah.
because I think a lot of people are shying away from that because of COVID and because of, the industrial and the e-commerce. And it's like, oh, retail's dead, but the statistics you're giving, it's not.
No.
And I agree with you on, potential with the new administration of really bringing out maybe a lot more consumers to shop, right? I mean, that is all possible too. So, I mean, that all makes total sense. I love the triple net lease. I know I've done several syndication deals with those. They perform well, really passive, just really great deals. So I like what you said about that. And of course, those deals should get more opportune as the interest rates, hopefully continue coming down here in the next couple years, right? It never happens overnight. So let's shift gears for a second, Dan, to putting on like your real estate agent hat, your commercial real estate sales hat. You've built a team, right? It's not just you. There is a team over there that you've built. So talk about strategies to grow your team, your sales team, right, at Encore and your group, the Lewkowicz Group within Encore. And now you're a boutique commercial real estate powerhouse, right? So what strategies did you use? You can just share a couple nuggets because we have a lot of real estate agents, a lot of real estate brokers that are right now trying to seize this opportunity to grow their team and do like what you've done.
Yeah, so I mean, repeatable systems are huge. Organization is huge. I actually getting into this industry really helped me organize my life. I was never an organized person. I was a very fast thinking person, which has its benefits, but I think
Sure.
contributed to me maybe being more cluttered than I would like. So the first thing I did when I got in was I just made a very advanced but manageable system of filing. So if I need to find, let's say I'm like, oh man, I need a representation agreement from the Taco Bell that I sold in 2021. Well, I know exactly where to find it in my mind
Okay.
and in my OneDrive, which is nice because then I have access at home, I have access here
Hmm.
at work, I have access on my phone. I can literally access everything everywhere. So organization and systems are huge. Okay. I'm at a point now that's different than where I was when I entered the industry. When I entered the industry, I had specific measurables of the number of cold calls I'd make every day. I didn't leave the office unless I made 60 calls a day. Today, I don't do that. I make hardly any cold calls, but that's because I'm in a different position now.
Hmm.
So, there are other systems. I have an agent, a junior agent who, he's out there hunting, making the cold calls, getting proposals to put together to tell people what their property's worth. And then, we have systems where he sends me comps, he sends me the package he puts together, I help him price it out, he schedules a call, we get on the call together to win the listing, right? So that's one part of what I'm doing. I focus the majority of my efforts and time and energy on my own business. So, while I don't do that much cold calling, I still do cold outreach. I've done a lot of cold email outreach where I have an assistant or an intern sending out emails on my behalf with flyers saying, hey, I just closed these 5 Wendy's deals. I know you own a Wendy's. Let me tell you what it's worth. That's been super effective. In
Love
fact,
that.
last year I had somebody reach out to me 2.5 years later after the email was sent and just replied, okay, I want to sell my property, right? It was amazing. I do a lot of paper mailing, which no commercial agents do.
Right.
I don't have a postcard on me, but I've got it on obviously my OneDrive. But I have a postcard my daughter created that essentially says, "Hey, I sold these specific 6 shopping centers in your neighborhood. Reach out to me. I'm a shopping center expert. I'll tell you what your property is worth." And it's got a QR code for them to book a meeting, right? So, send that out, start getting phone calls coming in. Hey, that property on the flyer with the blue roof, that's across the street from my building. You must be an expert. Boom, here's a listing. So, strategies like
Okay.
that are great. I have some more advanced stuff that I do that, maybe I can get into, one-on-one if somebody's
Mhm.
interested in terms of, how I source, more of my deals. But at this point, thankfully, I've created relationships and I have individuals that list with me, as repeat clients multiple times over and over. The other thing that I'll say that is like so underutilized is social media. And I think specifically LinkedIn. I mean, I've worked very hard at it. I've got 22,000 followers. I know that LinkedIn, I have a spreadsheet where I put the source of every closing I've ever had, where that came from. And I know LinkedIn has contributed to significant business for me. And,
Mhm.
and even if it's not the direct, hey, I saw you on LinkedIn, or John Smith on LinkedIn, or Robert Weinberg on LinkedIn told me to reach out to you, where it's very trackable. Many other times I pick up the phone, and instead of me picking up the phone saying, hey, this is Dan Lewkowicz, and having to build credibility, they say, oh, I know who you are. I follow you every day on LinkedIn. I had an instance where we like to go to the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island. Was up in the Grand Hotel, sitting down, having an appetizer, and this guy just keeps looking at me, giving me like a look, like he wants to say something. So finally, his wife gets up to use the bathroom. He comes right over to the table and he says, "Are you Dan Lewkowicz from LinkedIn?" And I said, "I'm Dan Lewkowicz. I have stuff on LinkedIn." And he's like, "Oh, I've been following you for years. Hey, can we? I want to pick your brain about something." So I said, "Sure." Took my number or sent me a DM on LinkedIn. We ended up getting together, and he was trying to start a brokerage, wanted my advice. So I sat down with him for a couple hours, had a great time. And then the next week, he sends an email with a client on there, and he says, "Hey John, Dan is an expert in this type of business. I had at the time I had just sold a pair of $50 million resorts, and he says, I know John, you want to sell your hotel. Dan's the guy." So John reaches out to me. Boom, $24 million listing. That is 100% from LinkedIn. So
Mhm.
I would highly recommend that people get involved in LinkedIn. Listen, it's not easy to post every day. You don't have to post every day. Post once a week, post 3 times a week. If you can manage it, post every day. There's a feature on there to schedule your posts so you don't have to do it in real time. You can just schedule them all out in advance. But I highly recommend it. If you do that steady 90 days every day or 3 times a week, you'll see a meaningful impact in your business. It's been transformative for me, and I highly recommend it.
Okay. So it sounds like when it comes to like attracting other agents or other people to a team, there's really three takeaways I had from what you said. The first one is systems, right? Then the second one is the sales piece or mentorship, I should say, where you said you're mentoring this other agent, they're doing cold calls, they're setting up deals, and then like passing them or working them with you, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Yep.
huge, the mentorship. You need that in real estate. I had that when I started. A lot of people don't, and that can be, make it or break it. And then the third thing is marketing. We're not in the real estate business. We're in the marketing business, right? And I was told that at a young age when I started in mortgage. We're not in the mortgage business. We're in the marketing business. We just do
Yeah.
mortgage to monetize. You just sell commercial real estate to monetize, right? So that's what it comes down to. So I would say to everyone listening, if you're looking to grow your team, focus on those three pillars. Like he said, be really present online and on marketing and LinkedIn and all these social medias. Do some of the more innovative things like direct mail. Show the people you want to work with that you're on the cutting edge, you're innovative, right? And mentor them. If you've got experience, even a couple years, that's more than the people starting today. So
Right.
take these people under your wing. Even if you've only done a couple deals, you know more than they do. And if you've got a couple years experience and, dozens or hundreds of deals like me or Dan, well, then really take them under your wing and mentor them long term, right? And get a piece of those deals. And you might end up with someone who's even better at your job than you are. And that's the type of person you want on your team, right? For sure. So, that totally resonates. I think that's awesome. The systems, that's key because when I talk and I deal with a lot of newer agents, right, doing their first few deals, and I'm working on the financing, and they're like running around with their chicken with their head cut off. They don't know where documents are. They don't know how to get signatures on this and that. So like you need to have systems in place to do that. Systems really are like software. So you said OneDrive, there's DocuSign, there's Arrive.
Yep.
Like depending on what part of the industry you're in, there's all these different systems that you can plug into to create a business that works for you instead of you working for it, right? And I'll tell you,
Yes.
me personally, I've got like over 100 different systems that I pay for every month to make my business run like clockwork. And I'm sure you do too. Some of them are 10, $20 a month. Some of them are 500 a month, right? If they're, and some of them are even more, but that's our business, right? So as a new realtor, as a new professional in real estate, don't look at that as, hey, I'll get to that later. Hey, I'll do that after I close a few deals. Hey, I'll do that. I'll invest. Start that foundation now. Work with your mentor to get some systems in place so you at least have a foundation like of 2 or 3 systems to make sure that if it's 9 o'clock at night and you need to pull a contract from 2 months ago, you can do that like easily without calling and texting and having to do this whole big thing. So totally resonates, Dan. I mean, you couldn't have answered it better. So as we wrap up, what I wanted to ask you was about this CRE Pro course. So, you transition from residential and fix and flip and you're doing commercial and you created this CRE Pro course. Okay. Can you just talk about what the CRE Pro course is, just very quickly in a nutshell? And how can someone who's aspiring to be a commercial real estate professional like yourself break in?
Yeah, so I mean, when I broke into the industry, it was like figure it out. And I watched at my brokerage and other brokerages, not this brokerage, but the brokerage I was at the time, I watched they would just hire as many people as they could, convince them like, jump in. And by the way, you talked about fear before. I mean, going into commercial real estate brokerage, like it's scary because it takes 6, 9, 12 months or more for most people to get their first check. And I was very fortunate. I got my first listing within a couple of months for, $7+ million. And I had my first closing, I think, within 4 months. I was very fortunate. But
Mm-hmm.
I just watched all these people get thrown in. It was a sink or swim mentality. It was a figure it out as you go. I mean, I remember asking for books. Hey, what books can I read so that I can learn about this? And there was one book that was like this thin, great book on the 1031 exchange. So I definitely noticed that there wasn't a lot of training material at all, and that most brokerages didn't have a training like protocol. It just didn't exist. It was like figure it out, learn by osmosis. You're hanging out with the guy who's, killing it. So just by watching him, you should learn. You should learn enough to do it yourself, right? Which is not sufficient. So myself and my partner Zach Rasinger decided that we needed to create kind of like a one-stop shop course teaching people how to become top commercial real estate brokers, taking everything we had learned over the years, condensing it into 23 modules, and creating an on-demand course that also had the collateral material, right? The actual documents that we referenced, the cold call scripts that we went through, they're included in the course too. So we put that together in order to help people because we saw that there was a need. And education is something I'm passionate about. Like I said before, I've spoken on over 300 podcasts. I'm speaking at a town hall meeting in person tonight. And I have a feeling that there's another course, up the sleeves that I'll get moving on shortly. But it's just for me, it's about being passionate about what I do and wanting to help other people. Because to your point earlier, Robert, is that there are so many people that help me along the way, formally or informally, and the least that I can do is give back. So what I love is when people reach out and say, hey, I heard you on such and such a podcast, and can I run this situation by you? Can I run this deal by you? Can we talk about, what your thoughts are on this or that or the other? It's so rewarding to me. And then the best thing is when, 6 months or a year later, they call me back and say, Dan, look at what I did. And I get to hear about their success story. So, that goes to say, like anybody who's watching this, if there's anything I can do on any of these fronts, brokerage, investing, education, et cetera, please reach out. It's what I look forward to. It's what excites me.
Yeah, and we'll give everyone all your contact here as we when we wrap up the show. With that said, just to clarify, it really sounds like this CRE Pro course. This is a course on commercial real estate brokerage, and it would be appropriate for either residential real estate brokers that are looking to break into the commercial side, right? Or people that maybe aren't even in commercial or real estate at all that are hearing this that are like, hey, this sounds very lucrative. This sounds like something I want to be
Yeah.
involved in, right? And the CRE Pro course can take them from knowing nothing to actually getting their first deal or their first few deals in the pipeline, right?
And even people who are already in the industry, it's been in the industry less than 5 years, not making as much money as they'd like, or feel like they don't have sufficient training.
Okay. Perfect, because I know we have a ton of listeners that fit right into that space that you're talking.
Great.
And everyone's looking in the new year for new opportunities, right? Maybe
No
you've been
doubt.
hitting your head against the wall in residential real estate, like most have for the last few years, right? And maybe commercial is a place that you can close an extra deal to half a dozen deals a year. And I'm not going to say everyone does it for the money, but commercial real estate is very lucrative on the brokerage side. And you said that was really what led you there, was being able to make so much money on one transaction versus having to flip three, five, eight houses, right, to make the same. So switching gears now to talk about repurposing, because I had read in your bio and stuff, repurposing spaces. I actually had a guest on recently from Long Yards that they do like industrial repurposing of exterior and outdoor spaces. And I really love that discussion because I think that's the future of commercial real estate, is that repurposing, especially with some of the work from home stuff going on. And, I've heard and seen a lot of stuff about like turning hotels into apartments, turning all that sort of stuff, right? So talk about repurposing spaces from a creative standpoint. Like, what's the craziest that thing that you've seen? What are some ideas about turning underutilized spaces into thriving investments?
Yeah, I mean, so there's all kinds. I love this type of stuff too. So, I mean, I just sold a 100,000 square foot, 100% vacant office building, a huge office tower, 10 floors. I just sold that at auction, and it was sold to an individual who came in and is going to convert it to, some type of a living, multifamily. So that's going to
Mhm.
be interesting. Office, a lot of opportunity office to multifamily conversion, a lot of plumbing issues that may come up, but that's one. Right now, I think the first that comes to my mind after that is, you're going to see thousands of former major retail pharmacies coming to market vacant, right? Rite Aid, I'm in Michigan. Rite Aid closed every single store in the state of Ohio and Michigan, right? And that doesn't matter if they were top performing stores or bottom performing stores. So I think that there's an excellent opportunity here for whoever kind of comes up with the next big idea on what to do with those boxes. The problem is that they're a box, right? They're square. Your typical shopping center is more of like a hot dog shape, right? Not nearly as deep as it is wide. So, we've definitely seen some people convert those to 2 or 3 tenant retail centers. That's interesting.
Hmm.
There's a concept that I work with that essentially they will go in and have the landlord raise 4,000 square feet of the roof so that they can put in like a huge play structure, and then they have like a subscription model for kids to come play. That's an interesting, innovative concept. I've seen former pharmacies turned into pickleball, concepts. That's I think is a little bit of a, maybe it's more of a fad than people would like to admit, but it's interesting nonetheless. But like early education, like a Cadence Academy learning experience, those type
Hmm.
of tenants. We see obviously like a lot of Family Dollars and auto zones and those types moving into the former pharmacies, but whoever can come in and really take advantage of the fact that you can pick up these former pharmacies for a lot less than they had ever sold for, right? And a ridiculous amount less than you could build them for. There's definitely opportunity there. So I'm excited about that. I think that that's going to be interesting. I know one of my sons is he does this thing called Kid Strong, which is like it's like fun gymnastics for
Hmm.
kids. I every time I walk in to watch him on Thursdays, I'm like scratching my head trying to figure out what this used to be, because it clearly was some other form of, likely retail. You can tell by the sliding doors that, it wasn't created for this, but it's being repurposed for this. So, there is a lot of opportunity, and real estate is evolutionary. So, the greatest thing is that a property will eventually rise to its highest and best use, and that highest and best use might be the highest and best use for the next decade, and then it could rise to something else. So it's just interesting to be a part of that. I've been involved in a lot of former quick service restaurant transactions, let's say former Burger King, for example, that were converted to like a Starbucks, retrofitted that way, or even just totally demolished and retrofitted. I'm dealing right now with the sale of a Starbucks that's occurring this month in Ohio that was essentially just excess land. The individual owned an office building that had a little piece of excess land and came up with a great idea that he wanted to subdivide it and build a Starbucks on that excess land. Talk about, turning that tax liability into either an income producing asset or an asset that I can help him sell to cash out. I mean, that's a great opportunity. So a lot of stuff like that going on all over the country.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, I really see the biggest opportunity, and I think it's always been like this. This isn't new, but right now it's at the forefront because of the media and social media and all that, right? Like throwing it in our face. But there's all this vacant space all over, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that vacant space, for example, is only worth $5 million vacant the way it stands now. But an entrepreneur or an investor can come in and say that vacant space, I can turn it into an apartment building, for example.
Right.
And all of a sudden, the value based on, future cash flows and opportunity, right? It goes from a $5 million valuation to double, triple, quadruple, right? Like that's what we're talking about sometimes. So it can be like a real lottery ticket if you do it right in the
Yeah.
repurposing.
No
And I
doubt.
think because I think a lot of people go, well, why the hell would I buy like an old rundown pharmacy? I don't know what the heck I'm going to do with that. You got to think outside that box, though. What could
Yes.
you turn that pharmacy into that's opportune today, right? That can generate revenue today. And I love what you said about the kids' play place and stuff. My daughter goes to like this trampoline park and it's in an old grocery store.
Yes.
Okay. And that's really common. And like these grocery stores, they were doing a certain amount of revenue, and that was fine. But now repurposing it into this kids' play place trampoline park, now the revenue's double, triple, quadruple, right? And that has an impact on the asset value. So I think it requires a lot of obviously a lot of research, a lot of
Hmm.
balls. You got to conquer your fear because we're talking about buying a property, repurposing it. Like it's capital intensive, but the payoff can be once in a lifetime for sure. So I want to thank you, Dan, for taking some time out because this has been eye opening. We really focus a lot on residential real estate and have in the past, and I love talking about commercial because I think from an investment standpoint, commercial real estate is just a solid asset class no matter what, right? Decade in, decade out. Yeah, there's ups and
Right.
downs like anything else, but there's also a lot of money to be made. So your expertise there really helps. So, can you just give our listeners some information about reaching out to you, getting in touch with you if
Sure.
this has resonated so they can collaborate with you?
Absolutely. So first of all, I'm, as I said, very active on LinkedIn. You can follow me there. My first name is Dan, last name is Lewkowicz, Lewkowicz. Again, Lewkowicz. I could probably even give a link in the show notes to my actual profile to click on. Send me a message. Let me know, this is where we first connected and would love to get to know you. Also, I'll give out my direct phone number. It's 248-943-2838. Again, 248-943-2838. If you own commercial property, you want to know what it's worth, if you're contemplating selling it, if you have a deal and you want another set of eyes on it, even if it's not my deal, or if you just want to talk about commercial real estate, please reach out. Like I said, like I love that. That is what gives me fulfillment. So you can call me, you can reach me on LinkedIn, and it would be my absolute pleasure to be in touch.
Thank you. And to everyone listening, if you could do a huge favor and go over and leave us a 5-star review or 2-star review, just leave us some sort of feedback, right? That's what gets the word out here. We're really loading up the gills with amazing real estate investors and professionals just like Dan coming out all the time this year on all our future episodes. So thank you again, Dan, for your time. Thanks everyone for
Yeah.
listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.